My name is Akanksha Kalra, and I serve as co-chair of the Philadelphia chapter of Punjabi Chamber of Commerce. PCC is a nonprofit organization, a community of individuals, business owners, and professionals in 17 global chapters located in North America, Europe, India, and now in Australia. PCC provides advocacy on behalf of its members, opportunities for mentorship, education and collaboration, and group benefits such as classifieds, member directory, and networking events. PCC membership is free. And if you're joining us from other parts of the world, allow me to tell you a little bit about the city where I live and work. Philadelphia is one of the largest cities in the US, conveniently located between New York City, New Jersey, and Washington, D.C. Historically significant, Philadelphia is the home of liberty, the place where the Declaration of Independence was signed. Today, the city is well known for its medical hospitals and universities, educational and research institutions, and it is a major hub for the pharmaceutical industry, technology, and telecom sector and other commercial businesses. PCC Philadelphia chapter includes individuals and business owners and professionals from the greater Philadelphia area, South New Jersey, and the state of Delaware, where our new President Biden is from. It is now my pleasure to welcome you to PCC Philadelphia chapter's first webinar since our recent launch. Today's panel discussion covers an important topic, the changing workplace, COVID and beyond. COVID-19 has been a catalyst for major changes in many areas of our lives and has certainly accelerated the process and pace of change in the workplace. I would now like to invite Neha Arnold to tell us more about the topic for today's discussion and introduce our panelists. Neha Arnold is the CEO of Sedna Consulting Group, a company specializing in services and staffing solutions for the technology industry. Over to you, Neha.
Yes, thank you, Akanksha. So we're excited to bring together our wonderful panelists to, as Akanksha mentioned, to have this very important discussion. And we're very lucky today to have panelists who are going to be bringing a very diverse range of perspectives, from business owners to new job seekers to a community player, talking about all of the different factors that are affecting not only their individual experiences, but also what the larger ecosystem and the future of work looks like. So I would like to now introduce our first panelist, Anne. Anne is the founder of Future Works Alliance in Philadelphia. She's a pragmatic futurist who translates vision into concrete and actionable playbooks. She has previously served as the Director of Special Initiatives at the City of Philadelphia. In 2016, she led the equitable design of the Philadelphia Pre-K program, which now provides thousands of children with quality start to learning and life. She's also a writer, a speaker, policy expert, and social entrepreneur. So thank you, Anne, for joining us today. Next. Thank you. Next, we have Ramit. Ramit leads the information systems infrastructure for Edward Jones. In this role, he is responsible for leading and preparing the firm's IS infrastructure for the future. Prior to joining Edward Jones in March 2019, Ramit served as Citigroup's Global Head of Enterprise Infrastructure Solutions for 12 years after holding similar technology roles with BlackRock and McKinsey. When he's not busy brainstorming ways to prepare the firm's future, Ramit enjoys reading, cooking, trying new cuisines, and exploring everything that his new city has to offer. Thank you, Ramit, for joining us. Next, we have Rohan. Rohan is a senior at the Fox School of Business at Temple University. Rohan's motto is improvise, adapt, and overcome. As a student at Temple University, he has learned to improvise and adapt to a remote school environment. He's also part of Broad Street Badshahs, an all-male, nationally competitive collegiate dance team. He founded Brisk Commerce, which is a free motivational and investment insight page on Instagram. In a few short months, he's been able to compile over 9,000 followers, and he has adapted to the growing social media market and providing authentic and engaging content for everyone to see. Thank you, Rohan.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our discussion today. I know we have a lot to get through. I would encourage all of our attendees to engage with us and each other throughout this session. You can do that by using the chat function, and you can also do that by using the Q&A function. So I'm going to go through a series of questions with our wonderful panelists here, and all of our attendees will have an opportunity to ask questions that they would like to get answered at the end of the session. So as we're getting started with our first question, I would encourage our attendees to let us know in the chat box where you're dialing in from. We would love to hear what part of the country or what part of the world you're able to join us here today, and would love to see the community that we have gathered. So with that, we're gonna kick it off to our panelists, and this goes out to all three. Anyone can feel free to start. What impact has a hybrid way of working and attending school had on how we communicate, connect, and create?
And why don't you start?
Thank you. Certainly. Well, I think when the question first was put out there around hybrid, I feel as if we're not quite in the hybrid mode yet, at least on a company basis. I think that right now companies are either majority work from home, or many in the workforce, up to, a third or so, are just essential workers and they're not work from home at all. But for the work from home segment of the population and the workforce, it's changed, it's accelerated adoption, obviously. Companies that had teams sitting around for a long time or had Zoom accounts, now they're essential to the communication. And now I think the innovation has moved to the next phase for this segment of the workforce to really think through how to replicate those water cooler moments, if you will, how to make the virtual working and collaborative experience better. And so I'm looking forward to seeing the tools and the next generation of collaborative work tools, enhance the virtual work experience and to make collaboration even better, now that a majority of companies and workers have made a leap out of necessity. Now I think there's an opportunity to see the next layer, the next level. So I'm looking forward to that. But I think back to the question around hybrid, it remains to be seen. And I think it'll be industry by industry how much the culture, the acceptance of work from home as a 2 to 3 day per week option sticks around. I think that's an open question.
Yeah, so I'll add to that. So I think that's a key question. What exactly happens when we do get back to what life is supposed to be after the pandemic is over? So we truly don't know. However, every organization that I know of, including my own, we are preparing for the actual hybrid environment. The term that is used pretty commonly is that when we get back, so right now, basically what is happening is that most of us are on Zoom like this, like we are right now. These Brady Bunch squares that we are all on the same footing. So we are on the phone, we are on video, we are all talking the same way. So we are at the same advantage or the disadvantage. So when we get back to work, when we get to that hybrid situation where now people are saying that, oh, we want that flexibility because it's shown that it's much more productive at work if you have that flexibility to work when you want to work and when you can work from home. So when you get to that state, we want to make sure that nobody's at any disadvantage. That's a term that is used. Nobody's at a disadvantage. So all the organizations right now are figuring out different ways, different technologies, different systems, whether through a hybrid with Zoom or with Microsoft Teams, and having much more modern conference rooms, much more collaborative workspaces, so that when we get back to work, the hybrid mode means that, yes, you could work from anywhere. Even if you want to work from a Starbucks, you should not be at a disadvantage to work there. So that does bring in the future of work, in my view, is that there's going to be a lot more flexibility than it has been before. And there's a tacit acceptance now in the organizations that, well, this is going to be the new normal. It's not like, people are expecting that it is going to be pre-March or February of 2020, the people will behave like that. I don't think anybody believes that anymore. So looking forward to this hybrid mode as it comes forward.
Yeah, Rohan,
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your perspective. I know you are bringing more of a student perspective, someone who's about to enter the workforce. What has this transition for you been like?
Yeah, definitely. So I can say to the fact that communication is key, whether you're a student, executive, worker, manager. I think that communication is the sort of overarching topic that combines all of us together. And with this pandemic and these unfortunate circumstances, the face-to-face interactions have been limited. And the typical business handshake is now reduced to a Zoom emoji or something along those lines. So when we're looking at it from that perspective, I think that Temple University specifically, and I can also speak to the effect of other colleges around the area, they've done quite a good job of adapting to the changing circumstances. And what I mean by that is that they were able to effectively train all the staff and all the students to let them know that, this remote classroom environment is something that we're going to be going to. And it's good because it keeps the face-to-face interaction, right in front of us. Everything is available from the tips of our fingers at our laptop, and companies are adapting as well. I really can't speak to the effect of what the large majority of companies are doing, but I think that colleges are making it a lot more easily accessible to achieve guidance virtually, to achieve easily accessible office hours for students. And I think overall it's just been a very, although a rough time period, a smooth transition to the online interface. And I think that the hybrid class environment, which is something that I think that schools will be doing as well as companies, I think that it's on us to adapt to it as much as possible and to adapt as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Yeah, thank you. So it seems, very clear that what we were used to in terms of working together, collaborating, communicating prior to February, March 2020 is never going to be that way, right? We've, I think, all sort of come to terms that the way that we work and interact, whether that's in the workplace or in school or in our daily lives or communities, is going to look very different. And so I'm curious to hear, and Anne, if you want to tell us first, how are expectations of the workforce changing? Are there new or changing expectations that an employer has of the employees or new staff that they're bringing on?
So I think that's a really key question that touches on company culture. And I think that is the big unknown. In the crisis of switching, forced social distancing, forced lockdown last March, there's, I think, a little bit more understanding and lacks from, professors or managers that you're meeting with or CEOs, where it's like, okay, everyone's sort of figuring this out. A lot of children are not in school, they're not in childcare. But as things return more to normal and parts of the work from home protocol stick, I think that each company is going to decide and have more clear protocols about expectations of, online. For instance, should everyone be on video screen? What should the dress code be like? Are we just throwing that out the window now that we're work from home? So I think that a lot of companies are figuring this out now, but it's an important question that connects the technical capabilities of virtual collaboration and virtual working, remote working, to the cultural expectations. And I think that that's a big unknown that will tie directly to talent retention, right? So industry by industry before COVID, the tech industry, for instance, was all about sneakers and hoodies, and virtual work was much more widely accepted. There was no penalty for, zooming in. In other industries and cultures, there's greater formality, and face-to-face was the expected bar, and careers are penalized if you were remote working a little too much. So I think it remains to be seen where different companies and industry cultures will land on this question.
Ramit, can you talk a little bit about the specific, skill sets when an employer is screening new potential employees? Are there any changes we're seeing in terms of either the hard skills or the soft skills that are now necessary for our emerging workforce?
Great question. So let me just add to what Anne just mentioned. I think, I moved to an organization that was almost 100% face-to-face organization. And for pre-pandemic, we, in our worst of our nightmares, we couldn't even imagine that we could ever be in this situation and work remotely like this. Well, we transformed, and if we transformed, I can tell you that every organization in the world can transform to become the way we are right now. And we have actually been very productive. So, I mean, no complaints about this. And that something has been a surprising change for almost all of our leadership. Like this happened, we were able to do it. But one thing which came out, and going back to Neha's question on this, we noticed that when you are in a face-to-face culture, when you are there in person every single day, working with your leaders, working with your teams, the expectations are much more different. You can work in your little silo, if you will. I know silo is considered a bad term, but you can work in a little cylinder and work just in what you do, keep your heads down and just be there. And, when you get up in the morning, you go grab some coffee, you'll talk to someone, you'll get some water cooler talk, and you'll get done. So those skills those skills or lack of skills, whichever way you want to put it, became a little more challenged in this time of pandemic, where when people are working in this little silo, working in this little uh, shell of their own, that became a little nuanced, a little challenged. And people had to transform themselves. They had to become a little more accessible. People had to reach out, make an effort to reach out and talk to other people rather than wait for that. When you grabbing a coffee, you could talk to someone. You had to actually talk to someone, set up some time, call people randomly. So that skill, that collaborative skill that was required, it became almost a de facto standard. And I'm not, when I say collaborative skills, I'm not saying go to Facebook, or I'm not talking about that. It's just that general talking with each other. If you have Zoom in your organization or Teams in your organization, just try to meet each other face to face, see each other out there. That became more of a norm. And as we started looking for people for new hires in our organization, that skill, that instead of a horizontal skill, we started looking for more of a vertical skill. Sorry, instead of a vertical skill, started looking for a more of a horizontal skill, to have a little more knowledge just than your own specific skill set. Started looking more into that, and that's going to be an evolving piece. That means if this is the new normal that we would be in, I think the educational institutions will also have to transform to add little more horizontal skills to our students coming out, versus just teaching them hardcore one cylindrical subject, which may not work very well in the future. So that's my 2 cents on this, that how we have evolved and how we are hiring people. Those soft skills are extremely important. They are, because you're not meeting anyone in person. You can't expect that the meeting will happen by force. You have to make an effort to do it. So softer skills are certainly taking a lot of precedence in this new environment now.
Yeah, and you definitely emphasize the need for, the new workforce, and I would say even the existing workforce, to continue to strengthen their communication skills, because some of the benefits we had of being in person, being able to use our body language, being able to build those relationships by attending events together, or having conversation by the water cooler, or going on coffee chats, that's become a little bit more formalized. You have to send someone a calendar invite, you have to get on the phone with them, do all of that. So definitely hearing your point of view about building softer skills, around communication, being flexible, being adaptable to changing circumstances, because as much as companies are navigating this new landscape and this new way of working, we as individuals and workers are navigating that as well. So I think it requires everyone at all level to be growing and evolving. Rohan, I'm interested to hear from your perspective as someone who's about to enter the workforce full time. What are some of your expectations? What are you looking for from employers?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess we can all definitely agree that COVID has been a roadblock for people trying to find and facilitate transfer into like a new company, especially for students. And I talk amongst my colleagues and peers all the time in class, and they're always like, I've applied to this job, didn't hear back, or they told me that, this company's having a hire freeze or something along those lines. So I think that some of these roadblocks persist because in the college environment, we used to have like resume palooza events where executives would come to edit your resume, and they would help you sort of tailor your cover letter and resume in the right direction so that when you apply for a job, you're in a good place. And that genuine human interaction that I was talking about previously is now reduced to like an online interface. But looking at it from the college perspective, as a student that's applying, the expectations that I would have as a student is that no matter whether or not there's an opportunity available, just like sending an email back or like facilitating a conversation is definitely something that is key to knowing that although this person didn't end up getting the job, they were able to establish an effective connection with the individual for like later in their career. So to that effect, lots of companies are starting to adapt now, and it's been very, very efficient from our perspective as well, because students are getting more adept to the Zoom atmosphere. We're able to have virtual networking events like the one that we have currently. We're able to get more comfortable, and as we progress throughout this pandemic and hopefully find some solutions for our current problems. As we adapt, things will get easier. Everything is right in front of you. Right now, you're accessing this laptop that you're at, or your desktop or phone. You have it at the tip of your fingers. And to that effect, you have every single opportunity available for you at the tip of your fingers. So, things will be a lot more accessible. All it comes down to is a general awareness of knowing the opportunities that are around you and what you can capitalize on.
And I think that's a really positive and great way of seeing, what has come out of it. And I know we'll be talking a little bit more about that down the road, but it seems like while we're all learning to adapt and grow, it has in some sense made it a little bit more accessible to perhaps reach people or connect with people that you might not have been able to if you needed to just meet them face to face. So I want to transition a little bit to talking about, what this experience has been like for all of you now that, the place that we work, the place that we live, the place that we socialize, all of that is confined to, for some of us, 1-bedroom apartments with our significant others and family members. So would love to hear your thoughts on what this so-called work-life balance has been, and maybe you could kick us off.
Yeah, happily. So what a trip, right? It's been really quite a year. I've learned more about my husband's work than I would ever imagine I would know. I've become his editor. He emails his whole staff, and I edit the emails, because why not? I'm here. So there's for working mothers, especially in all seriousness, this has been absolutely a painful nightmare for work from home moms that have no childcare and school age children. Fortunately, my children are a little bit older, but mom is available all the time to their children. That is, that's the impression that a lot of kids have, even when they're 17, when they can't find something, they're yelling mom throughout the house. They're not yelling, dad, where are my shoes? So I think a lot of women are struggling with an impossible task in front of them. And we're seeing this in the data. 2 million women recently in a McKinsey report indicated that they're considering leaving their careers because their mental health cannot, and their physical health cannot sustain the juggling act. My children are not school age, but there's so many women that are going through this difficult time. And I think it also depends on the person. I think that extroverts are suffering a little bit more than introverts, who, you know, there's a lot to be said for, you know, personal disposition, but the bump in productivity that we see could be a lack of boundaries between work and home, and, you know, the lack of flexibility with some companies, and, you know, adjusting performance measurements for people that are in different situations. And so, you know, that I think that companies have a huge opportunity right now to demonstrate empathy, to demonstrate you know, flexibility under extraordinary circumstances. And I think that in the end, the pain that working mothers in particular are experiencing right now, they'll have massive gains at the end of this, because work from home will be much more acceptable. And when the children do go back to childcare and school, that is a win for working moms, to have that flexibility. That's really a talent retention strategy. So.
Oh, very well said, and I think I totally agree with all of that. And I think you're right about the fact that there have been a lot of people suffering through this pandemic. The kids at home, I mean, a lot of places kids could not go to school in person, so that there was teaching was supposed to be done in person going on. And it's become, to be honest, when the whole thing started, it was still, I mean, I still recall people would come and apologize that, okay, I have to take care of kids, or, you know, there was an apologetic tone to all of that. And over the course of time, I think it became a new norm, and the organizations became much more accepting, became a little more flexible about this thing. I'm not not saying that it became easy, but I think it is now an acceptable norm that things happen. The life is now intertwined with work life. Your personal life is now intertwined with your personal life extensively, and that goes to the fact that when you talk about the work-life balance, where does it start and where does it end? We start very early. You know, I don't know when we end, but until we let's knock off on the bed, it just goes on forever. So how does the work-life balance come in? Is this the new normal? What's going to happen? And all of these things will keep on evolving. And, you know, I think what I tell my team specifically is that, you know, try to find some balance in your embedded within your day itself. Don't expect the normal to be the way it was, at least for some time. Until we get to a new normal, we'll know what the new normal is. But try to find that embedded normal within the day itself. For example, if you don't have uh, a meeting or don't have a deliverable or something during the middle of the day, don't feel ashamed if you take that 1 hour off. Or, like, you know, go to the gym. No, you can't go to the gym right now. That's, you know, most of the people don't go to gym. Go for a walk if you want to within the day itself. If you want to do that, that's fine. Don't feel ashamed about it, because that's how you will bring some sanity into your life, you know, on a day-to-day basis. Because otherwise, this is, I mean, it's not going away for the next 6 months, the crisis that we are in. And the mental balance, the mental health is now is starting to take toll on a lot of people. And I think we have to find that work-life balance, and we have to, as leaders, we are trying to make an effort to make sure that, you know, we have a healthy workforce, not only physically but mentally also. So we all have to get that work-life balance in somehow.
Yeah, and it sounds like, you know, especially as a result of the pandemic, there's more of a shift to work life integration. I know that's a term that I had been, you know, hearing for several years. And now that all of those activities are happening in the same space, it's not so much, okay, these are my personal things I need to take care of before, you know, work starts at 9, and things I'll do after I get off at 6. It's really thinking about, you know, what is this new integrated way of working? And, you know, hopefully a positive outcome of this will be greater empathy and flexibility and understanding from the employers, and, you know, understanding that there are other parts of our life that are affecting not only our productivity, but just our mental well-being and happiness. And I think it is going to put more onus on employers to really think critically about how to create a work environment that can really allow their employees to be their best selves without feeling burnt out and stressed. And that's something I had been hearing a lot, especially around the holidays, where you would expect people to start to wind down and take time off. There were people I heard who had to take time off to get work done because there was just so many other things that were happening around them. Rohan, can you talk a little bit from your perspective? I know as a full-time student, you've also been working several internships, and everything that you've had to deal with as a student and as a job seeker. Are there any tips you want to share? What are things that have worked well for you in terms of navigating this new work-life integration, work-life blend?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me first things first start out by saying that definitely empathize with Anne, because my mother has been an anchor for me throughout this entire process. My parents have been supportive, as a student. During this entire process, you need somebody to help, like to lean on essentially. And as a student, it's been difficult to actually have and maintain a work-life balance. Being in an internship, I've been in an internship in person as well as virtually. So going to work, coming back home, you have two distinguished spaces. Now, all of that space is combined into one. Your work environment is the same as your relaxing environment. Your relaxing environment is the same as the environment that you're watching TV, AKA home. So where do you exactly find and distinguish the balance between that? So I think that, personally, I go to separate rooms of the house. Like the thing is, like, I currently am in my study. I sit here and I do all my work in here. I close the door and I kind of like close myself off to the rest of the house. And then when I want to take a break, whenever I feel like I'm a little bit mentally exhausted, I'll step up. I'll do exactly what Ramit said. I'll go for a walk, like even around the house, like elsewhere outside. It's a great way to like get a new refreshed sense of work, because at times when you're staring at a screen, you tend to get tunnel vision. And that's, counterproductive. But at the same time, it's very important to distinguish yourselves, whether you're in a one-bedroom apartment or in a house, a condo, where else. It doesn't really, you need to have that effective balance. And some tips that I've used over this time are utilizing some of the softwares that we have right in front of our very fingertips, right? We have Microsoft Office, we have Microsoft Outlook. And personally, I use Microsoft Outlook as an organization tool to let me know exactly when I have what appointments, when I have class, and especially, when I have like certain important events coming up. So I think that it's very important to use our tools. We have our devices that are computers right in the palms of our hand. We can use them very effectively to maintain a very nice work-life balance.
Thank you for sharing some of your tangible tips. Hopefully that will be helpful for everyone listening. I know that definitely gave me some ideas for how I can continue to make sure that, I'm remaining productive while also feeling well and healthy. And so throughout the course of this discussion, we've talked about, challenges that everyone, and specifically, certain groups and individuals with additional responsibilities have had to incur. I'm curious to hear, are there any positives that you see, whether that's at an individual level, whether that's changes in the workplace, whether that's, impact in the ecosystem? What are some positive things that we have to look forward to coming out on the other side of this?
So I guess we're in a ladies first pattern here, so I assume I'll take it first. I think there's going to be very positive things, as I mentioned, with working mothers in particular. For a segment of my career, I worked from home before, it was like it is now. for about 4 years. And then I went to work for the city of Philadelphia, which had an incredibly traditional face-to-face. Like if your direct report couldn't see you, then you're not working kind of culture. And that was quite a jolt. It just felt like a time warp backwards. It was a talent deterrent, actually. Like people just felt like the work environment is very old fashioned. So that's a major benefit, I think, especially for retaining young, innovative folks that grew up digitally native. It doesn't make sense to them to have a 9-to-5 mentality where performance is measured by hours clocked. It's very industrial mindset. And so I think one of the greatest benefits from this is truly more forward thinking, remote work as perfectly productive, perfectly acceptable. I think another advantage of this is that the plight of quote unquote essential workers has been highlighted. For too long, there's really been a bifurcated economy where some workers have incredibly great working conditions and are treated, as if the company wants to keep them and cares about them. I mean, some of this is naturally supply and demand. There's fewer talented people than there are, people that can do jobs like drive Uber, for example. But the coronavirus really demonstrated that some key elements of our workforce, like really important people, are not paid very well. And so we saw this, for example, in nursing homes, some of the highest risk hotspots in our country, where people were expected to risk contracting COVID for $9 an hour. Well, they quit. They're not doing that. And so that's sort of, I think one of the benefits of this will make it easier to really have a conversation about wages, about the nature of all work being valuable and some work really being essential, not to mention healthcare workers. I mean, we literally have to make decisions right now this past year that protects the lives of, workers that it takes 10 years, 12 years to build up the expertise of a doctor, of a nurse. These are huge investments writ large that we risk when we don't, get this virus under control. So I think it's, and lastly, I think that the question of surveillance at work, Amazon has been surveilling their workers for a long time, for example, but surveillance is creeping into white collar settings as well. And I think that personally, I think this is a very old school mentality, but the question of how to manage in a virtual work setting is a challenge. And that the more forward thinking companies that don't micromanage, that do, encourage their workforce to take walks midday without penalty or not, without surveilling how many hours they're using their company software or their company laptop, that's really gonna, I think, create differences and give talented workers choices about what sort of culture, what sort of climate, what sort of corporation or company do they want to work for? Do they want to work for someone that's surveilling their day, or do they want to work with someone who really understands how to manage a remote workforce effectively and still create a culture that people want to be a part of?
It's a great points. And in my case, I would say, besides not having to shave this often and wear joggers more often, I mean, there's certainly many more positives that I think will come out of all of this. To your point, and I think, yes, I think the mentality is shifting from a time-based employment to more of a deliverable-based employment, even for our resources. As long as you're delivering, we don't care as much as you have to be from 9 to 5 on front of your desktop. Of course, certain jobs are different, but most of the time, this is what is happening quite frequently now. But more than that, I think what I see the positive coming out of this pandemic is we had been going through, and I'm going a little, techno jargon a little bit, so please bear with me a little bit. We were in this phase of what was called the digital transformation in the industry, across the industry. Like we were doing everything manually. There was the time to market or the efficiency of delivering certain things were were under pressure. They were being challenged that it does take certain things to take so long, and certain industries are able to do it much better. And every organization, every enterprise was in the phase of transforming themselves to make them more efficient, improve the time to market. As you know that, we are all losing patience in the time of iPhone. Instant gratification is becoming really big, and that was basically challenging all the legacy industries. The pandemic basically completely transformed that piece. The all industry, anybody who wanted to survive during the pandemic had to, on a dime, pivot and transform themselves and make themselves much more efficient. They had to find different ways of moving stuff around. The whole supply chain strategy changed. There were not people available in warehouses to help you out. There was like they had to think about ways of short circuiting their old processes and old ways of doing things. They had to move things around. Now, when we talk about this, people think about, oh, when you make yourself more efficient, there is going to be a loss of jobs. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Now, that's the same thing that came into mind when we had the Industrial Revolution also. Oh, the jobs will be lost. But in fact, the number of jobs just spiraled up rather than go down. Everything just went up. So in this transformation, that stage that we are in, what I see happening is that there'll be a new kind of industry that will be coming out of post-pandemic. We are seeing this already. We are seeing how companies like Instacart, companies like DoorDash, Grubhub, they have completely transformed. They're making delivery at home a new normal. Now, how many people will go back? I mean, I know I want to go back to my grocery store in the normal without a mask and buy stuff. I want to do that eventually. But I think I might just use Instacart for the things when I want to do it very rapidly. I don't have time. I could do that. There are many such industries evolving, and I just gave you one example, one small example. But there are many industry evolving all across the spectrum, which is the transformational state of the nature we are in. And I do expect that to continue and maybe continue to evolve our economy and transform with new kinds of businesses, new kinds of roles that will get developed. So I'm a little excited about it. Let's put it this way. I know we are going through this pain right now, but I do feel that eventually we will be in a state which will make us much more productive, much more exciting times ahead of me. I'm an optimist, as you can see.
Yep. So, to that point, I think Ramit and they summarized it very well. I think that it's a very transformative process for different industries across the nation. They're taking very nice steps. But overall, from an interpersonal standpoint, I think that we'll see a shift in the more positive side. There'll be more awareness. There'll be a better community. There'll be more empathy, and there'll be more helping other people in need. And this will come out of the fact that we all experienced this COVID circumstance together. We were all in this together. And, one person's struggles, one person's need for another job or a new opening or a new school that someone may want to go to, it'll all lead to one close-knit and tight experience that I think that, it'll definitely be going upwards. And these are only some of the small positives that I see overall. And I think that, some of the other positives definitely come in relation to the workplace as well. I think you'll see a lot more people working from home. I think that, the point that Ramit had about Instacart and all those other things, I think that we'll see an increased need for automation and more time on people's hands to do other things. And I can definitely also testify to the fact that Sedna Consulting Group and Penn Solutions have been at the forefront of this sort of transition, and I think that we can definitely see that with Sedna's initiative to donate masks to Chicago, 30,000, and Penn Solutions, one of my previous internships, initiatives to make an equitable internship experience for people in a virtual environment. I think we'll see a lot of different industries follow. And this will be a very transformative and positive experience for all of us moving forward.
And thank you all for sharing some of the things that you're hopeful about. I mean, hearing about just greater levels of empathy, hopefully across the board innovation in a variety of different industries, really helping to accelerate the digital transformation that we have been undergoing, and really helping us evaluate or reevaluate as a society what type of work and occupations we value, and how much kind of, worth we put to those, and recognizing people for the work that they're doing and the hours that they're putting in as our essential workers and healthcare professionals. So I think these are just some of the things that we're all very hopeful about, and some of the positives that we're looking at, while recognizing the challenges and hardships that many, if not most of us, have had to go through in the past year. So at this point, I want to open it up to our attendees to ask away any questions. You can do that in the chat. There's also a Q&A feature, so you'll see a button at the bottom of your screen. So you can submit questions directly there, and we will take some of those now. All right, so we have a couple of questions already. So our first question is around what will companies look for in hiring new employees? So taking into account the new workforce's willingness to work remotely, or even, versus a preference for working in person at an office, how do we see companies balancing perhaps these two different needs or viewpoints in the workforce?
I can take that question. And as I mentioned in the beginning, that my company was almost 100% face-to-face, and that meant that our hiring was based in the areas where our offices are. So we had two main locations, and that's where we ended up. After the pandemic, I can tell you that we have started hiring people in all the 50 states. I personally wish it was done before when I joined, because I could have just moved to Hawaii and worked from there, because now we have some people working from Hawaii remotely, and that's a change in culture that's happening for sure. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it remains to be seen, what no one can predict for certain, but I would hope that some of the gender bias relaxes as women, as it becomes more normalized for a few days a week to work from home. That in some of my previous roles with employers, that was seen as like a privilege that needed to be earned. You had to like really almost be a superstar to earn that privilege and produce for a few years and get to a certain point in your career before you had that privilege of working from home, or trust, like built up trust. And I think that really forced some difficult choices for talented women to like maybe step off of the fast track to the C-suite in certain industries. But I'm hoping that long term we see as women who decided to leave during the pandemic because it was untenable, I'm hoping that companies, recognize the juggling act and the skill sets, frankly, the problem solving, the managerial skills that working mothers they have to have, that's an asset for the company, and that the collaborative nature and empathy and the tendency to take initiative to build relationships across departments, that's an added benefit of working, women's skill sets that I think really create a better culture in companies. And so, I think that my hope is that the implicit gender bias that happens in professional settings is relaxed.
Yeah, definitely. And we have a couple of other follow-up questions sort of related to this idea of, what are changes that we're seeing in terms of hiring and decisions that companies have had to make. So we have a question here from the audience. A year in, are we seeing any trends that indicate whether or not people hired through virtual interviews have been a good fit for the organization?
Yeah, so if I can speak to this effect, actually, I've had plenty of virtual interviews. And I think that, companies are doing quite a good job at specifying their requirements for working at home, and they're making it quite flexible for new students, new hires to adapt to these circumstances. I think that, this is a statistic from stanford.edu. A whopping 42 to 43% of employees are now working from home, or, I'm sure even more percentage are working in some sort of higher, hybrid format. So I think that overall, I think because we're able to have a face-to-face interaction via Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Slack, Google Meets, any of these other virtual platforms, I think that we're able to get a better understanding as interviewees of what to expect from an organization.
And can I just add to that? I mean, I think one of the things that's going to become increasingly important, and it may be obvious, but telegenics and communication style. I mean, now everybody has to have a baseline ability to look at the camera and look decent on camera. And so this introduces a potential, penalty or advantage. It matters now much more than it did before. And I think, the colleges will get hip to this, just like they, teach students communication skills now. It's just like another more enhanced level of communication skill. But telegenic voice, God forbid if you're born with a really annoying voice, or, you have some sort of physical, you're not, there's some sort of physical problem, that may become another type of bias.
Yeah, I think, Anne, that's a really good point. Now, if you're interviewing for a job, you're almost inviting the employer into your home, right? They can see sort of like what's on your walls, what's going on around you. So I think it is interesting to kind of think about, what's the impact this is having in terms of, reducing or conversely, increasing the amount of bias an employer potentially has. But Ramit, I think you wanted to share a perspective on this question.
So, I know for the first part of the pandemic, we were not hiring like everybody else. Everybody stopped hiring. And then we realized that we do need to start hiring because otherwise we suffer. So we started hiring again. And we did hire a bunch of people during the pandemic, and all of them were remote. And to the question, basically, I don't think we've had so far, and it's a, the set of time is pretty short, but so far we haven't had any issues. We had to transform the way we interview, though, by the way. We had to create these little snippets of what we call digital interviews, where we send out 5 or 6 questions and ask the interviewee to basically first record that 6 questions or answer to those questions and see how they respond to it before we screen them and take them to the next round. That brings in to that earlier point about communication and how you communicate, how articulate you get out of those things. So we have had those a little more targeted interviews, but so far, I have not seen any issues to this question. I think India has this question. We haven't seen any concerns about hiring people remotely during the pandemic, and everything's working fine. So I at least in the short time that we've had to test this out, we haven't seen any issues as yet.
Another question that's a little bit related to this, but more so around, what are the areas in which that companies have to step up to ensure that they can attract the right talent given these circumstances? So is there something more or different that companies are having to do to remain, competitive and to show that they are able to be empathetic, they're able to be understanding, all of these things that the new workforce is requiring?
Agree.
Well, I think here in Philadelphia, there's been a recent emphasis from advocates, and also the local chamber took a position and issued a pledge for skills-based hiring. It's widely been reported that the talent wars there's no end in sight to talent wars. So the people who have the skills that companies need, modern companies that have gone through a digital transformation, there's skill sets that are going to be in very high demand, and there's a finite number of people who have those skills. And there's more demand for that than the pipeline of college graduates to meet that demand, whether it's soft skills or hard technical skills. And so what's coming out of actually another set of digital transformation is as skills, focusing on skills. To this point in history, credentials from a college or a high school were a proxy for skills that were acquired, right? But technology is now introducing the capacity to measure skills acquired and skipping the credential part. And so this is disruptive to education models. I'm proud to be on the advisory board of Smart Kids Club with Surinder Sharma, who introduced me to this chapter. And that's exactly what their app does, is it ensures that skills are acquired no matter what grade the child or the student is in. And companies are starting to incorporate skills assessments into their hiring practice. And so I think that companies who do the very hard work, and it is very hard work, to take a job description and really define the rich set of skills that are required for a particular role and match that with skills regardless of whether or not someone has a credential. There's incredibly disruptive time right now in adult learning, and there's a lot of potential to tap into other talent pools if companies go through this transition of incorporating skills-based hiring instead of just tell us a friend of a friend who graduated from your college and we'll hire them because somebody knows somebody. There's a whole group of Americans and global citizens that have skills to do those jobs, but they're overlooked because they haven't been able to pay to acquire the credential. And so I think that there's an opportunity there for companies that are willing to, reevaluate the 4-year degree requirement.
Well, I want to thank all of the panelists for providing your point of view. I know this has been a really meaty and exciting conversation. I know we still have a few more questions coming up, but we do want to give people an opportunity to sort of close out the discussion at 2 p.m. Eastern. And I want to pass it off to Cindy just to give a few remarks before we end today's session. But again, a big thank you to Rohan and Ramit. That was really insightful, just hearing your individual perspectives on how you've navigated the pandemic, the challenges, and sort of what you're hopeful for and how you're preparing for the future. So just a thank you from my end, and passing it to you, Cindy.
I think you're on mute, Sandeep.
We still can't hear you. Sandeep, I think we still have you on mute.
There should be a button on the bottom left-hand side of
There
your.
he goes. I think he's unmuted now.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, it's unmute. Okay. Yeah.
Yep, go ahead.
And my name is Sandy, and I'm the co-chair of the Philly chapter. On behalf of PCC and the Philly chapter, I really thank a wonderful blend of our panelists, including the youngsters, experience, Ramit, and I think they've given us a new dimension. A work from home is not just work from home for our work, but also a new perspective, ordering on Instacart and all, which possibly would leave us additional time in future and to build up our own personalities and to be able to juggle with your kids coming on to the video interview and those kind of things happening. So I think we're very happy with such a beautiful panel, and PCC has has been growing rapidly we need leadership. We need involvement from a broad base of community leaders, whether it is Rohan, our panelists, our people who are attending the event. Membership is free. Lot of relationships, friendships I have built across chapters, Toronto, Vancouver, London, and we all as a community, we feel each member shall strengthen our community. PCC has done a great job, and it is giving the opportunity to all of us to be able to speak, be part of these webinars. And I have personally gained by engaging in these webinars and the activities. I would request everyone to pass on this message, become part of the Punjabi Chamber of Commerce. And it's open to whether you are a Punjabi or a non-Punjabi, join us, ask for help, offer your service, offer your help. Again, get involved. Thank you so much. Our wonderful panelists, thank you so much once again. And Ramit and Rohan for wonderful insights. Thank you so much. And I would like to close our event and appreciate everyone giving their time for the event.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
for having me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.